is happening? Okay. All right, so the negative is going to flip it over the x-axis. X squared is equal to the parabola. Shrink vertically. What's that mean it's doing? Multiplying the what? Where? Which of these letters? X or Y? Not X. To the Y, right? So, it multiplies the Y by negative 1/6, and it keeps the X the same. So, we already have a basic understanding of quadratic functions and what exactly is happening with them. So, now let's go back and let's review stuff that you've already done. So, we're going to write down and we're going to graph this problem here in a minute, but we're going to find the axis of symmetry, we're going to find the vertex, we're going to find the x-intercept. Based on things that you did back in Algebra 2. Raise your hand if you remember how to find the axis of symmetry. No? That is, but I can't graph it until I have the axis of symmetry. That's actually going to help me down here at the x-intercept. The what? Not necessarily. It would be the origin if that was just x squared, but now it's x squared minus 10x plus 25. So it's all shifted around. So it's a formula that you need to have memorized. It's actually a formula that's part from the quadratic formula. So x equals negative b over 2a. So it's not the entire quadratic formula, it's only a piece of it. Well, before we figure that out, what's a, what's b, what's c? I know c's not there. Good. A would be 1, b would be negative 10, and c is going to be 25. So now plug those two numbers in that you need, and let's find that axis of symmetry. Negative c, that'd be positive 10. Over 2 times 1. So that would be x equals 5. Correct? Now notice I wrote x equals 5. I didn't just write 5. You just write 5, I'm going to assume it's 5 cows. But the axis of symmetry is a line. A line at x equals 5. So I'm going to draw my x equals 5 line here. Now, if you would like, there is graph paper up here. You can grab a sheet of graph paper and paste that in if you want to do it that way. Or you can just draw your graph off to the side. So we have x equals 5. And that is my axis of symmetry. Okay? So I know the graph is either going to open up on both sides or it's going to open down on both sides. So how am I going to find my vertex? Well, that's my y-intercept. Well, that's my x-intercept. Okay, so let me repeat. I know my graph has to either open up or down on this, but I don't know the y part, right? But I know the x part. How would I find the y?
Take like one of those table things, and then plug in your x and your y.
Kind of. What x do I need to plug in? Yeah, plug in 5 to the equation. That'll give you the vertex. Plug in the number you got for the axis of symmetry. So plug in axis of symmetry. We're going to abbreviate to the original equation. So you have 5 equals 5 squared times 10 times 5 plus 25. So I got 0. What about you guys? But the vertex is a ordered pair, isn't it? not just 0. So what comma what? 5 comma 0 is right. 5 comma 0. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to put that on my graph right here. 5 comma 0. Now, the next thing it wants me to do is to find the x-intercept. And several of you have already told me how to do that. How do I do that? Factor. So to find x-intercepts, we factor. Wait, before we factor it, what if it doesn't factor? What could I do then? Well, Bednar is factoring. Quadratic formula, that famous quadratic formula. But this one does factor, doesn't it? Into x minus 5, x minus 5. And we set each one equal to 0. So I get x equals 5, x equals 5. What? Because what times what is 25 but adds to negative 10? Negative 5 and negative 5. All right. Now we actually say that it has an x-intercept at x equals 5 with a multiplicity of 2. It's a multiplicity of 2. Meaning, notice it had 2 x equals 5, right? So a multiplicity of 2. One thing to note about the graph is that it's got to come either down and touch that and go back up, or come up and touch that and go back down. But it actually doesn't cross at x equals 5. It just touches and comes back. That's going to help us when we go over tomorrow's lesson. Okay? So anytime it has an even multiplicity, it touches and then comes back. So now we need to make a chart, right? I like to make my charts very simple. I don't want to have to use that entire equation. So what I like to do is I like to go back to my parent function. What's the parent function? X squared. Okay, the parent function will help me to make the chart. I'm going to plug in the number 1 and the number 2 into the parent function. What's 1 squared? What's 2 squared? All right. Now, you do need to look in front. Is there anything in front? No. If there was, you would multiply those y's by that number. So if it had been negative 1/2, you would multiply them by negative 1/2. Remember in our examples, we actually talked about it would multiply the y's, right? So from here, I'm going to start at the vertex and go over 1, up 1 on both sides. Then I'm going to go over 2, up 4 from the vertex on both sides. Over 2, up 1, 2, 3, 4. Over 2, up 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's my graph. That's my graph with every single piece that they want to know about. It's all a review of Algebra 2, but we have to review before we can actually remember it, right? Okay. So, I do have another one, so you do need a second graph, looks like. And I want you to do the exact same thing. Find the AOS, find the vertex. There we go. Nope. There we go. Find the vertex, find the x-intercept, all of that. They're right on my desk, Whitney. So I'm going to go ahead and find the axis of symmetry because it looks like most of you have that. X equals negative c over 2x. So that would be 4 over negative 2. So you get x equals negative 2, right? Remember, when you write that axis of symmetry, it has to be x equals. Otherwise, it's wrong. Oh, let me remind you that one more time. If you're writing the axis of symmetry, it must be x equals, or it's automatically wrong. Okay, let me go and find the vertex. Negative 2 squared minus 4 times negative 2. plus 21. Negative 2 squared is
4.
4 with a negative in front. Plus 8 plus 21, which is what number? 25? So that would be negative 2 comma 25. All right, so we're a bit off the graph, but that's not a big deal. Will this be opening up or down? Down, right? Okay. So I'm going to put my 25, let's make these by 2. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 20, 22, 24, so 25 is right in there. That makes sense? Trying to help myself out a little bit. That'll make it a little easier. Well, next thing I have to do is find those x-intercepts. You have two ways to do this. Way number one is to factor out a negative 1. And if I do that, I get a negative, positive x squared, positive 4x minus 21. And what times what's negative 21 but adds to 4? Positive 7 and negative 3. So then I'll set those equal to 0. I get x equals negative 7, x equals 3. So there's my two x-intercepts. How many of you bednarded instead? That's perfectly fine too. So let me show that. You cross that off and you multiply this by negative 1. So I get x squared minus 4x minus 21. So that would be x minus 7, x plus 3, right? Which is very similar to what I have. Except since I multiplied by a negative 1, I have to divide by negative 1. So I get x plus 7, x minus 3. And if I set them equal to 0, I still get those. Well, let's plot those. Negative 7 and 3. Now, do I really need to put other points on to know what this graph looks like? Mallory's shaking her head no. I agree with Mallory. Because I know it starts up here and it's going down, right? It starts up here and it's going down. So I can do that. I don't have to make a table for this one. Why did I have to make a table on the last one? What? Okay, but why else? Let's go ahead. Okay. So you knew it was going up, right? But notice my x-intercept was this point. My vertex was this point. So you only had 1 point. When you draw a graph based on 1 point, that's why you made a table. On this graph, how many points did you have by the time you were done? 3. Could you draw your graph? Yeah. So sometimes you don't have to make the chart if you can already see the graph. But if you're only given 1 point, and it's your x-intercept, it's your vertex, well, then I need some more points to graph. All right, any questions on graphing? All looks familiar, right? All right, so here's our next one. We're going to write the equation of a parabola whose vertex is at negative 4, 11, and passes through the point negative 6, 15. So in order to do this problem, you actually need to remember that basic form of an equation for a parabola, which has a square root. And the form is y equals a x minus h squared plus k. Now that a that's at the very front tells me how wide it is, how skinny the parabola is, something like that. But if I'm just given 2 points, can I tell how fat or skinny this thing is? Can I? Can you figure that out from 2 points? Well, not just by looking at them, right? I have to do a little bit of math. So, they tell me the vertex is at negative 4, 11. What can I label that as? H and 10. Good. We'll label that H and 10. And then they give me a point, negative 6, 15. What do you label any point at? X and Y. All right. So I've got an H and a K, I've got an X and a Y. What am I missing from this equation? A. So we've got to solve for A. Let's plug in all of our numbers and get A then. That means I'm going to plug in the 15 for Y. I don't know what A is. X is -6 minus H is -4 plus K is 11. So I just plugged in my numbers. What do I do first to solve this? Very good. My dear Aunt Sally, thanks you for following that. So 15 equals A times -2 squared plus 11. What do I do next? My exponent, very good. That Aunt Sally, she's very happy with you. Since -2 squared is 4, right? I'm going to put that in front of my A. Mainly because, but if you wrote it behind it, that's fine. But I like 4A better than A4. Wait, does this look like an equation you solved back in maybe pre-algebra? Yeah, go ahead and solve it. Go ahead and solve this pre-algebra equation. Algebra 3, pre-algebra. See how it just trickled down, right? So we subtract 11, and then we get A by itself. How many of you got A equals 1? Perfect. Now, does it say find A, or does it say find an equation? Find an equation. Well, an equation has to have the letters X and Y in it. So we're going to rewrite our equation. Y equals, what's our A? 1. If you don't want to write the 1, you don't have to since it's a 1. But that way you can see when you're looking back in your notes where that number came from. X, minus H. So that would be, minus a -4 would be plus 4. Okay, plus 4 squared plus K. So it would be plus 11. That's my equation. Well, it's easy if you remember that equation. And I'll tell you right now, you need to know that equation for your next quiz, which will happen at the beginning of next week. Today's Tuesday. It just didn't quite work out to make it a Friday quiz, because I want to do a review day. Oh no, a word. Let's take a minute. Let's read through it. So, big long word problem, right? Lots of stuff going on. But they give me an equation. Now that equation has lots of numbers, decimals in there, and if I notice it says 70,000, so if I tried to graph it in my calculator, I'd have to change the window settings, right? That's going to throw me all off. Well, before I do that, what's this graph look like? What can you tell me about the graph based on just stuff you already know? It is a parabola, good. It's a good first start. What do you know about the parabola? Okay, all right. What else can you tell me about this parabola? Something very simple, not too complicated here. Can you tell me if it's going to be a happy parabola or a sad parabola? Oh, okay. Happy parabola. Knowing just that's going to help me. Now, it wants to know how many units should be produced. How many units to produce a minimum cost? The minimum. Where's the minimum of that happy graph? It's where? It's in the vertex. Look at that. Look how that worked out, right? Notice I didn't really talk about the problem here. But it says how many units should be produced. Which part's the unit? Is the unit the X or the C? So, do I need to find the entire vertex? What do I need to find? The what? Well, part's the X. The x is called the axis of symmetry. Go ahead and find the axis of symmetry. It'll give us the answer. That's it. I'm not asking for the entire vertex. I'm just asking how many units, which is the x part, right? So go ahead and use your axis symmetry formula and find that. So this would be your A, this would be your B, and this is your C. You've got to make sure it's in order before you figure out A, B, and C. So A, B, C, everything's backwards. A, B, C. Just because it comes first doesn't mean it's A. A, B, C. Now, you've got to be careful in your calculator. You cannot just type in this calculator 120 divided by 2 times 0.075. That's wrong. Okay? Because right there, what it's going to do is take 120 times 2 and then multiply that answer by 0.75. But I want it to have that 0.75 on the bottom, right? So you need parentheses around the stuff on the bottom if you want to type it all at once. Must have those parentheses. And Trevor, what'd you get? What? 800? 800 what? 800 what? Units. Ah, because it asked how many units, so the answer is units. Do you guys see how I came up with those answers? Notice this is not a difficult problem at all, was it? Okay, the hardest thing I'm going to guess is putting it in the calculator. But you have to maybe draw a graph. I'm not asking a graph to scale. I'm just saying a graph. Look at my graph. Right? All right, let's try another word problem before we move on. One more. So you've read this problem. We've got a ball being thrown, right? A ball being thrown, and I can tell right here it's a negative, so it looks like this, right? And it wants to know what's the maximum height. That'd be this spot right here, correct? Okay, so that's all the further I've gone. I drew a graph. I'm going to get partial credit for that. Now it says, what's the maximum height? Now, height. Which part am I dealing with, X or Y? How'd you know that? Good. That's perfect. You need to be able to pick that part out. Well, I can't find Y without finding X, right? So the first thing we do is we're going to find our X. X equals -1 over 2 times -0.0032. And I'm going to pick on Trista because I know you have this. Can you just tell me what the X was? 156.25? Perfect. Okay. I watched her type it in her calculator and everything. So that's the X, but that's not what I want. I want to find the Y. So I'm going to use my calculator. I'm going to type this in -0.0032 156.25 plus 156.25 plus 3. Oh, forgot my squares. Good call. Very good call there. And note, I'm not asking you to do it by hand. I'm asking you to use the calculator. And Justin, what'd you get? 81.1258. You guys, oh, 12 feet? Okay, 81.125 feet. There we go. Whew. I got it, I got it. You guys agree? Justin, I really like one key thing that you did. You told me feet. I need to know. Otherwise, I'm going to assume it's cows. Every single time, I'm going to assume it's cows, and I'm never going to give you a problem about cows. I'm never going to give you a problem about cows. Ever. On purpose. That way, if you don't write something down, it has to be wrong. All right. So that's it. Now let's have you practice that tonight with your essential work. Which is 6 problems. 6 problems.